We come here to be uplifted, to join in community, and to get things done. But those of us who come from a world in which we're trying to build freedom are coming with pretty heavy hearts. For nearly 20 years, autocracies have been hardening. Strong democracies like my own United States are being crushed under our own polarization. And the hybrid democracies in the middle are fighting corruption and violence, and people are losing trust in their institutions. And it all seems to be speeding up. It's not just a problem for those of us who have dedicated our lives to the struggle for freedom. If you care about girls' education, if you care about climate change, peace, economic development, all of these things get better in countries where people can come together and learn freely, where they can organize freely, where they can build enterprises freely. Democracy matters to all of us who are working for a better world. So let me just take a moment and just acknowledge that heaviness of heart. We're facing a real setback, and it's a hard time. But I also want to put it in perspective. For the vast majority of human history, people have lived under various forms of authoritarianism, colonialism, monarchy that have kept nearly all of humanity in poverty and ignorance. People saw the first flowering of the democratic ideal in ancient Greece, but it wasn't for women or slaves or outsiders. It was a little country and a little place that was free. And then it ended for hundreds of years. When democracy was reborn in the 1700s, it broadened only slowly and with a lot of work to encompass more and more of our populations. And then there was another setback. By 1942, as totalitarianism and war encompassed the globe, there were only 12 democracies on Earth. And of those, one of them, my own, still refused to allow black people to vote in over a fifth of the states. From there, we grew a world. We grew a world that was vastly more peaceful, a world in which more people could flourish and reach their potential, a liberal democratic order for some, to which many other people aspired, that brought the greatest wealth, education, rights for women, the poor, children, minorities of any system that has ever governed people on Earth. It was a better world. And I want to acknowledge that progress because it's become a little cool in some circles to pretend that progress doesn't exist, that racism and sexism have always been with us and always will be. It's not true, and it's a dangerous pose because acknowledging progress is really important to figuring out how to get more of it and to keeping people in the fight. Now, that old world was not perfect. It had a long way to go, even at its best. And it is now not at its best. We're facing a setback. Authoritarians are learning. They're working together. They're making it harder for us to work together. They're cutting off our funding. They're damaging our reputations. They're harming our organizations. They're using propaganda and falsehood against many of us. And it's easy to feel as if it's just a few of us against big, powerful forces. There's the oppressor and the victim, the big government and the small individual. That's what totalitarian regimes have always wanted us to think. They want people to feel alone and separate and helpless in the face of a big, implacable government. But it has never been true. There have never been just two sides to an equation like this. There are always three. The people are in the house. The people are not bystanders, they are participants. Now, it's true that for most people, their default is to let their own agency slip away. I'm always surprised at just how abashed people get about creating any kind of ruckus. They don't want to make people look at them. They don't want to make a social situation uncomfortable. They just want to go about their lives. But that's not a bystander role. That's a participant's role. It's just that the way most people are participating is to go along with whomever's in power. And when power is being used against people and it's being used to keep others down, then society's putting its weight on that side. The main job of those of us who fight for freedom is to galvanize society and help it put its weight on the people's side. That's not my insight. Nearly 500 years ago, a Frenchman looked at the ancien regime and realized that it was just a handful of people who were allowing themselves to be above the law. They depended on regular people to maintain that fiction. Where has he acquired eyes enough to spy on all of you if you do not provide them yourselves, he asked. How can he have so many arms to beat you with if he does not borrow them from you? Every government depends on the consent of the governed, and the governed can withdraw their consent. Now, the genius of democracy is that it allows people to do that peacefully through regular elections. But many countries where democracy is eroding today are polarized, and there is a very special jujitsu to mobilize society in a polarized democracy. Because in authoritarian countries, if you can peel away a regime's pillars of support, you can count on a sizable majority of the population to be against the government. But in a polarized country, society is divided. If you try to organize from a maximalist position, you might get 50.1% and you might ram your position through. But when the other side gets 50.1% of the vote, they will not only ram their position through, they will try to undo everything you just did and then some. When the cycle gets strong enough, that can take down the whole system. It can take down the free press, the ability to organize even elections themselves. So how do you engage the mass of the people when society itself is polarized? It requires understanding some basic psychology. We evolved to be tribal. There's one hormone, oxytocin, that makes us aggressive toward outsiders and at the same time cling to our own group. It took 30,000 years for us to evolve to make us defensive toward others and altruistic toward our own. It goes really, really deep. So in polarized societies, if you trigger that defensive instinct, you can be pretty sure that a lot of people will be pushing back against you. It's not just because people are reading fake news or getting false facts. It's because they care more about their own identity than they care about the real facts. The neuroscientist Drew Weston took political partisans and put them in an MRI machine, and he read them political news that disagreed with their opinions while he was looking at their brains, and then he read them news that confirmed their previous beliefs. And what he found was that when their opinions got confirmed, they got a dopamine hit to their brains that gave them pleasure almost exactly the same way that cocaine gives a dopamine hit to our brains. In other words, having your political beliefs confirmed, if you're a partisan, is addictive. It means that people in polarized societies gain energy and pleasure from the fight, not from the solution. So those of us who want to make change in polarized societies have to be smarter. And that means we have to engage pluralism. Pluralism recognizes that there should not be one dominant identity. In societies that are diverse, we are stronger when we work together across different ideas, bringing people who are different together to build large majority coalitions that can work together. Now, it's easy to preach a really good game about pluralism, and it's really hard to do. It's much easier to insist that you can only work with people who agree with you. In fact, that you are a better person for insisting that all good things go together and making other people insist the same. But in a polarized society, if your ideas win out altogether, you can be pretty sure that they will get erased when the other side gets control. It's not enough to be right, and it's definitely not enough to be righteous. Instead, we need to get past our own basic psychological desire to prove our opponents wrong. There will always be a hardcore that will never agree with us, but there may be many others who look or vote differently and will agree with us if we let them save face, if we let them move around a polarizing issue rather than insist that they come directly to our side. Pluralists make room for such half agreements, for give and take, because we think in terms of addition, not subtraction. If we want positive change and we live in a diverse world, we just can't shrink the coalition of people who could be on our side in important fights. Consider the US civil rights movement. Activists face violence, even murder, to fight for their cause. But rather than narrowing it, they made common cause with Cold Warriors who insisted that the Soviets were benefiting from America's treatment of its black citizens. They worked with unions, some of whose members were quite racist, but who agreed that lowering wages for black people was bad for all of the union members as well. And once they'd built a coalition that was strong enough to fight back against the haters, they made common cause with Lyndon Johnson. Now, when Lyndon Johnson was in the Senate, he refused to criminalize lynching. He spoke against his own party's president when his own party's president desegregated the military. And as President Johnson, he escalated the Vietnam War, something that most civil rights activists detested. But the movement worked with him to pass a series of groundbreaking civil rights laws that changed America. I'm not saying it's fair. It is not fair to have to cajole a dominant order that is inherently unjust. But the civil rights leaders recognized that pluralism didn't mean giving ground on their core values. It meant engaging to explore where they could find agreement and building on that and compromising on the rest. That's hard. It's not kumbaya. It requires mastering ourselves before we seek to change others. But it's the realization that real change is possible that makes it so imperative to be serious about how we get from here to there. Our societies are the fulcrum for change in our countries. In polarized societies, progress comes from keeping your eye on the prize of what you're trying to achieve and working with others in broad coalitions to get that change done. Being curious to figure out where you agree, and then building that broad, diverse coalition to get there. Pluralism is how we make our agendas majority agendas. It's not something we concede to other people. It's not something we can donate to others to do. Every one of us has to play our part. Autocracies try to make us feel alone, but we're not alone. We here in this room are a movement. Each of us stands in the center of a web of relationships that give us strength. Each of us stands in the center of a web of relationships and networks that give us reach across our societies and across the entire world. And each of us can reach out to one other person, find an area where we agree, and move forward together. Thank you very much.